Hello viewers, Super GT here. I think Polyphony have really played the blinder with the recent update and a couple of races they've added into the multiplayer. The one we're joining here is the manufacturer final, the repeat of the Monaco World Final which happened recently. It's a long race around Spa in Group 3 cars with changeable weather. And as we jump into the qualifying, you might have noticed it was raining just then, but it's actually dry in the qualifying, which is a little bit weird. But there's a couple of reasons why this race and the couple of other races they've added into the game recently are just really positive for Gran Turismo. So what we're watching here first and foremost is my initial attempt at qualifying. I've gone for Porsche as I felt like this was a good all-round car for wet weather conditions and this circuit, albeit lacking in straight line speed somewhat. But the main reasons why this race was so good really is because, one, it utilises the weather, which is a very underutilised feature in Gran Turismo. It's a feature that works really well, but they don't really use it too much. Two, it's something different than the 3 standard daily races. And 3, it's a slightly longer race. Because often, a lot of the daily races are just a little bit too short. Now, we are watching the qualifying session here. My first lap, 2:17.8, put me sort of firmly in the mid-pack. This second lap, I was faster in the first 2 sectors. I'm going to try and bring that home in this third sector. 2:17.5, an improvement by 3.5 tenths. That puts me P5, albeit 6 tenths off the lead. And then this is my final lap. At least it was my best lap. My last chance really to try to improve upon the 2:17.5. Now coming down towards Radion and Eau Rouge, taking the curb, and then taking the curb. It was really about just carrying the speed and minimising distance travelled through that section, fast forwarding it slightly here towards the end of the Kemmel Straight into the Les Combes chicane. And again, carrying the speed as much as possible, 1.5 tenths quicker than our best lap so far. A little bit wide on the exit there. Then we head down into the tricky off-camber corner here. You have to be very patient. Back onto the power, and away we go. Now, as you can see, it's very dry in this qualifying session, but in the race itself, it mimics the World Final race they did in Monaco very recently, whereby the weather changed throughout the race, and it was a really, really interesting race. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it in the description. It's well worth a watch. It's quite a long race, but the strategy and the changing conditions, it really made for an exciting watch. And to be honest, in many ways, you could argue it's better than real racing in so many ways, just because of the sheer closeness of it, and the excitement and the unpredictability of it. But at the end of this lap, coming up towards the final sector, we're in the final sector now, and this moment we've actually improved on our first 2 sectors by quite a lot. We just need to bring home this advantage through the final chicane, braking just after the 150 board, carry the car over the curb, and then through the final chicane, back on the power, driving to the line. It's going to be a 2:17.0, puts me up to P4 temporarily, then to P5 as the car behind improved. And then I messed up completely the braking point here into the Les Combes chicane and had to cut the corner, and then boom, 2-second penalty, as it had to cut out the lap. So with the end of qualifying there, we find ourselves actually in P6. It just had to happen really, didn't it? And we're going to go on to the intermediate tyre, because as you can now see, it is raining on the circuit, and this is where this race becomes really interesting. So let's jump into the race as we round out the chicane here, and with the closer rolling starts, it is a slightly better track to start on, because in the past only the top 3 would start on the main straight, but now maybe about 10 cars can actually start on this straight. It's a bit better, a bit closer. So the race begins. You can see firmly in intermediate conditions with 15 laps of racing to go. Now into the first corner, the Spanish driver behind just makes a big mistake, brakes too late. To be fair to him, just lets me go. So, it's one of those things. I've done it many times where you just completely outbrake yourself. Perhaps you're focused on the car behind and then you forget to brake. But we've already lost 2 positions as a result of that, so that's not ideal at all. Coming up through Radion, you see the lack of grip up behind the Lamborghini now onto the straight. We've got a Porsche on the left hand side and a bit of lag. But we're going to try to get past this guy on the inside, 3 abreast as we head towards the braking point, which is about the 100-meter board. And we're going to get into the corner just fine. So back into P7, just trying to settle into the race as much as possible. 15 laps around Spa, you're looking at about 2.5 minutes per lap. And therefore it's going to be well over half an hour in total length, the whole race. And that's a really good length of race, I think. It's a good variety compared to the daily races, which are often, you know, ranging from like 6 minutes on daily race A and sometimes B, up to about 20 in daily race C sometimes. But I feel as though this is something that I think a lot of us would like to see a lot more of. And obviously I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments, but just having races every now and then, you know, that are a bit longer. The Lamborghini getting all out of shape behind, even if it was just once a week, just a race that's 45 minutes long or 36 minutes long or something like that, which just breaks up the monotony of the game. And I would say that the game certainly feels a lot more alive at the moment, with the 25th anniversary update, the recent 1.26 update, and there's just more things to do, especially online, because sometimes when you just log on Monday and there's 3 daily races that you don't like, and yeah, sometimes it can just get a bit repetitive. At the moment, it's a lot better, and this race kind of typifies what is good about Gran Turismo, and there just needs to be more of it, I think. But coming up into the chicane, end of lap number 1, and there's going to be a bump here. Now, I think it's actually down to lag, because if you actually watch Jotten Breer's YouTube channel, you actually see it from his perspective, and actually there was no contact on his part there. So there is a bit of lag in the lobby. I think it's more on my end, because I forgot to change my internet off of the Wi-Fi, which makes my connection quite weird, to be honest. But we find ourselves in P8, and I'm wanting to really utilise or maximise the capabilities of the Porsche. The Porsche is really, really good in these mixed, well, I say mixed, but wet conditions. It has very good traction and just general balance, and that is something that not all of these other cars have. The Subaru BRZ in front, I would say it does. As we head down the Kemmel Straight, we're going to just try to settle into this race. It is still quite a long race, and we've still got a lot of time left to go. We're only 3.8 seconds off of the lead, and we're in P8. So quite a lot of cars in quite close proximity, and that was another element of this race that I really enjoyed. The fact that it was quite a well balanced race. There was lots of different cars being used, and a lot of different players from all around Europe engaged in battle. It's always good to go toe to toe in a close race with lots of other people. So this was an enjoyable battle. Breer there goes through on his fellow Spaniard, and I'm going to try to repeat the move here against the Jaguar. Looking up the inside here into, is it Stavolo? I do seem to always forget my corner names. And we're trying to wrestle supremacy from the Jaguar on the exit of the chicane, and eventually managed to do it. Up into P7, so that's 1 position gained. A little bit of time there lost, although we're actually only 3.4 seconds off the lead. If anything, we've gained over the entirety of this lap so far. So not a bad lap, gaining a position and a bit of time against the leader. But let's try to reattach ourselves to the back of the train in front, because we have just slightly lost track, lost ground compared to the guy immediately in front. With a bit of space there to the guy behind, I don't really have to worry about defending into the chicane. But you see just how much time and momentum we get there on the way in to the chicane. Aston Martin there with poor traction on the exit, and as I was saying, the Porsche having very good traction comparatively. And unfortunately for Breer there, just going into the back of the Nissan GTR, who on the corner exit here is not going to get a good run. You see it again, the traction of the Porsche coming in, paying dividends here as we head down the straight. I'm going to bump into the back of the Nissan GTR in front. I found myself in P4, not long ago I was in P8, so this would have been a very good half a lap so far. being almost pushed down the straight by the GTR behind, and we're going to go 3 abreast here down the Kemmel Straight. I'm going to come across and try to defend the inside if I can. It's going to be quite close. I'm just going to pin him to the inside, and he thinks twice about going up the inside, and therefore I'm going to just wrestle 3rd position from them both. This and GTR definitely a quicker car in a straight line, but it didn't seem to prove to be the case there, as we find ourselves now in P3. This has been a really good couple of laps, and I would say we're definitely utilising the capability of the Porsche here, and we need to do that whilst it is wet. Whilst the track is in the favourable conditions for our car, we need to make the most of it before it begins to dry out, and I would expect that the faster straight line speed cars will come to the fore as the track begins to get drier. It's going through Blanchimont. That's not Blanchimont at all, that's Pouhon. So through Pouhon, getting a nice line there. The car just feels really balanced, just feels nice and easy to control. A little bit pointy if anything, which can be a bit tricky to manage, but overall the car very well suited to these conditions, and we're actually pulling in towards the leader, 2.5 seconds away from the race lead. The driver there up in the lead in the Nissan GTR, 2nd place in the Toyota Supra. Massive moment on the curb, and that is something so treacherous about these conditions. The curbs do not provide much grip at all, and I've lost crucial momentum. The Nissan GTR is going to come back at me here and go sweeping around the outside. I decide to back out. There's no need to fight that one, as it's only going to end in tears for someone. I'm going to settle in behind and perhaps try to utilise the slipstream of the Nissan GTR down the main straight, and then just try to resettle into this race. It's very easy to push too hard, too much, and make a crucial error. So we're just going to make sure we try and don't do that. Just have a nice consistent race without incidents wherever possible. Down into La Source hairpin, lap number 4 now. We're in P4. Can we get better traction on the exit? It's not quite going to happen there. But I'm going to settle in behind and just try to pull away ideally from that group behind. The Lamborghini there in P5 actually beginning to slow down the group behind, and we are actually 2 seconds clear of P5 now. So, lap 1, lap 2, it was a very close battle between the top 8, but as we can see here on the extended view that the race is just beginning to get a little bit more stretched, which is good if you're out front, and we just need to make sure that we have a nice consistent couple of laps here, pulling away from that group behind. A little bit wide through Les Combes, but not too bad, not losing too much time here. I would say that the leader there, 3.5 seconds in front, so we've actually lost about a second over the last sort of half a lap or so. Just need to re-establish our pace and consistency, as we haven't been taking every corner quite as good as we could have done over the last couple of corners. This GTR there, a little bit wide, but just regathering control. Towards the end of lap number 4, again, still just sticking about the same sort of distance away from the guys in front. 3.3 seconds off the lead. Similar distance, really, to the car in front as I was earlier in the lap. And then Catfish behind in the Lambo. 2.1 seconds behind. About the same gap as it was at the start of the lap. The GTR, though, having a horrible time. Trying to find some traction somewhere on the exit of the chicane, not quite managing it. And I'm just going to say thank you very much. I'll take P3 off your hands. And on the exit here, he's right behind me, but then you see the difference in traction. If you looked at the map there, I pull away quite extensively just in that phase of acceleration out of the corner, but through Radion, up the hill, over the crest, using the curb, and it's going to be quite a tricky defence here because that Nissan GTR is so powerful, so good in a straight line. There's not going to be much I can do here. I'm going to try to pull to the right hand side and defend the inside, and then usher him towards the outside as we go onto the brakes. And I think I've done just enough to prevent the overtake. So we've wrestled back 3rd position, which is good. Now 2.4 seconds off the lead. So this one just, ebbing and flowing, this race. And it's quite a tricky one, but it's a really fun race. It's a very fun race. And what you might notice on the track there, it is slightly getting drier. And I was just wondering, when is this crossover point going to be where the slick tyre actually is better? So we set a very quick lap there, it was temporarily the fastest lap of the race. No, it wasn't. It was very close to the fastest lap of the race, only about 2/10 away. But you can see the changing colours of tarmac on the circuit as we have a slowly emerging dry line. And this is where this race really does change, because obviously it hasn't rained for the last sort of 10 minutes. And as all the cars go around, the track is going to start drying up. That does explain why we are setting slightly quicker laps. And as we head up towards the final chicane, lap number 7, I'm just watching the top 2. Are they going to go into the pit lane? I'm going to copy them and go along with them. They haven't gone in, so I'm going to stay out as well. But what I do notice behind, if you looked in the distance, there was someone going into the pit lane as we set the fastest lap. You can see there a couple of guys going in from the intermediate tyre, and they're going to be changing over to the slick tyre. So this is a very crucial moment in the race, and we have to get this right. I would say that because everyone else behind has pretty much gone in, we need to come in at the end of this lap so that we don't fall foul to a big undercut. So let's see if we can just complete this lap, bring it home. This is the end of the second sector. We've gone purple, really courtesy of the track getting drier and drier. Our lap time should be getting faster and faster as the track gets drier. And you see there a very clear distinction in the colour of the tarmac now at the end of lap number 8. So it's pretty much a case now of just trying to bring the car home into the pit lane as quickly as possible, and then re-establishing ourselves on the hard tyre, the slick tyre, and then just trying to warm those tyres up and get used to them. Now into the pit lane we go, right up behind the top 2, 1, 2 and 3, and over to the hard tyre, the slick tyre. The wets come off, or the inters come off, and this is where you have to be really, really important. You're on a semi-slick, semi-wet track with slick tyres, and you see the guy in front has a massive moment as his wheels catch the edge of the water, and he loses loads of traction. And I'm going to go through up into P3. The guy behind us, who was in P4, has stayed out. So this is effectively the race lead here up against the Supra, and this is going to be a really tricky overtake because the Porsche doesn't have much straight line speed, as the Nissan GTR is going to pull up alongside on my right hand side. The Supra also very quick in the line, and I'm not quite really in a position to go for this move. And then the Nissan GTR managed to get back past me. This is where my race unravels. So unfortunately here, I just dipped 2 wheels onto the wet patch, and I wasn't quite ready for that. I wasn't prepared for exactly where the wet line was, and I was a little bit distracted by the 2 cars in front, and boom, before you know it, one mistake and you've lost maybe about 5 seconds and a handful of positions. And it's so easy to do that in these conditions, and this is the main peril of this kind of this situation here. You can see the clear distinction now between wet and dry, and you just basically have to stay within this groove, otherwise you're just going to lose so much traction, so much grip. And I'm kind of all over the place. These are not my best conditions, I must be said. It doesn't give me much confidence driving when you know that you're barely millimetres away from sliding off the circuit into barrier, into the shadow realm. Now into the first corner, lap number 10, nearly 2/3 of the way into the race, and there's an incident. There's a yellow flag. It looks like the car that pitted quite late has had a spin, and he's going to surrender P4. Now that driver would have actually stayed out in front. They actually drove a very good stint, but then that one mistake has surrendered their position. So back into P4, 5 seconds off the lead, and now with an Aston Martin for company, I'm going to have to try to defend against this guy and keep P4. I think he's backed out on this occasion on the Kemmel Straight, and my main strategy there was to try to go to the inside of the dry patch, and they tried to force them onto the outside and quite near the wet patch. And you notice that a lot of drivers don't really want to go near the wet patch if they can avoid it, and this is something I've seen. You see it in F1 quite a lot. When the track dries, it's really hard to overtake if you have to go off of the dry patch. It's almost just not worth doing. So sometimes races can become quite static in this situation when there's not much of a dry line to work with. But here, onto the straight, the Aston Martin gets really good momentum, and there's not much I can do about that. The Aston is really good in a straight line, and this is the inherent weakness of the Porsche. As good as it was in balance terms and in terms of traction, it does suffer somewhat in the straight line. Not always the best car. And I've come up against some very good straight line speed cars here in the Toyota Supra, the Nissan GTR. Now this guy's going to go flying past me, so it's quite tricky. So I had to really make dividends count when the track was wetter. But as the track has got drier, it's really not favoured my own driving style, as I'm not very confident in these kind of conditions, but also in the way that the car operates. You see they're just drifting two wheels onto the curb halfway through P1 and just losing all sorts of grip. Managing to keep the car under control, but losing maybe 2 seconds there to the Aston Martin. And it just shows you how treacherous these conditions are. You have to kind of work out which curbs you can take and which ones you can't. And ultimately, at the end of lap number 15, it was quite a lonely last couple of laps as I brought the car home in P5. And it was a little bit of a disappointing race in the sense that I think I could have been in that fight for the lead. But ultimately here, it was a really enjoyable race. We're going to bring it home in P5, and this is the kind of race that I really hope that Polyphony does more of. But that's the end of this one. There's another video on the screen for you for your viewing pleasure, so please click on it, give it a watch. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day, and I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.